Influence is unavoidable, even when you think you are being neutral. The question is not whether you are influencing. The question is whether your influence is defensible, if everyone could see it. Most people picture influence as persuasion tactics, or charisma, or pressure. But influence often hides in the smallest design choices. Which question you ask first, which example you pick, what you summarize, and what you omit. The order of options you present, even timing, and who is in the room. Each of those choices quietly shapes attention, interpretation, and what feels like a reasonable next step. So here's a cleaner distinction that holds up under inspection. Defensible influence helps people see evidence, trade-offs, stakeholders, and consequences. It also preserves the right to disagree. Extractive influence, by contrast, hides costs, manufactures urgency, exploits dependence, or makes refusal socially expensive. One expands the decision, the other collapses it. A practical definition helps. Influence for common good outcomes is an attempt to change someone's attention, interpretation, priorities, decisions, or behavior in a way that would remain defensible to all affected parties if the influence path were visible. Imagine the whole chain of persuasion written out and shared with everyone impacted. Would it still look fair? Would it still look honest? Would it still respect people's agency? That visibility test is powerful because it shifts you from winning to warrant. It also changes what you pay attention to in real time. You stop asking, did I get agreement? You start asking, did we earn agreement? One high-impact finding is that common good influence is not a single style. It shows up as recurring archetypes, with different drivers and different risks. Recognizing the archetype you are seeing or playing lets you respond without guessing motives and without escalating conflict. Start with the common good framer. This person names shared purpose and the hard trade-offs that come with it. Their driver is reviewable decision quality, not applause. The healthy response is not to resist the frame or accept it blindly. It is to test the evidence, the criteria being used, and the stakeholders that might be missing. If the shared purpose is real, it should survive scrutiny. Compare that to the compliance seeker. They push for fast agreement. You will hear language that compresses the space for questions. Can we just align? Everyone's on board? Their driver is reduced resistance. They may be tired, they may be rushed, or they may simply want control. The best response is to separate alignment from obedience. You can align on the goal while still disagreeing on the approach. You can also slow the decision without rejecting the person. Another archetype is the evidence translator. This is the person who converts complexity into usable decision language. They turn a messy system into assumptions, ranges, uncertainties, and implications. Their driver is shared understanding. The trap is to treat translation as certainty. A good response is to ask for assumptions and uncertainty explicitly. What would change your mind? Where are the weak signals? What do we know versus infer? Then there's the fear lever. This one is worth naming because it is common and because it often feels like being responsible. The fear lever makes one branch feel mandatory by amplifying threat salience. Their driver is control. The move is often, if we don't do this, something terrible will happen. Sometimes the risk is real. The issue is whether probability, reversibility, and options are being kept visible. The response is to restore calibration. How likely is the bad outcome? How soon? What is the smallest reversible step that buys learning? What are alternative mitigations that do not require immediate submission? Another subtle but crucial archetype is the stakeholder proxy. This person speaks for absent or lower power affected parties. Sometimes they are right, and they are the conscience in the room. Sometimes they are projecting or selectively representing. Their driver is representation. The response is to verify. Which stakeholders are being referenced? What do we actually know about their needs? Can we add the impacts to the decision criteria? And if possible, invite real input instead of relying on a proxy. Next is the status amplifier. They use rank, reputation, or confidence beyond the evidence. Their driver is authority advantage. You will hear certainty where there should be ranges, or dismissal where there should be trade-offs. The response is simple, and it can be respectful. Require claims to stand on evidence. Ask what data, what constraints, what prior outcomes support the conclusion. Status can set priority, it cannot substitute for truth. Finally, there is the bridge builder. This person looks for overlap between opposed parties. Their driver is coordination without humiliation. In organizations, this is often the only way anything moves. The caution is that a bridge can hide real risks, or paper overvalues conflict. The response is to use the bridge, but verify that the risks remain visible. Agreement that comes from vagueness is not alignment. It is deferred conflict. Once you can recognize these patterns, you can run a simple, inspectable test. Think of it as a decision tree you can apply in a meeting without derailing it. First, did the advocate clearly state the desired action? Not the vibe, not the general direction, the actual ask. If they did not, recover by asking for the requested decision. What are you asking us to do, specifically? Clarity here protects everyone. Second, did they disclose their stake? That means incentives, dependencies, and benefits. If not, recover by naming incentives. You can do it neutrally. Help us understand how this affects your team, your metrics, or your timeline. Hidden stakes create hidden pressure. Third, are costs, risks, and affected parties visible? Not just benefits, not just the happy path. If those elements are missing, you are on an extractive risk branch. The recovery move is to reopen criteria. Before we decide, let's list who bears the cost, what could go wrong, and who is not in the room. Fourth, can people disagree without punishment? This is the real test of defensibility. If dissent triggers ridicule, career risk, or social penalty, you are on a coercive pressure branch. The recovery is to create a safer dissent channel. That can mean anonymous input, a written pre-read with comments, a designated red team, or simply a leader saying clearly, disagreement is safe here and it will not be held against you. If the ask is stated, the stake is disclosed, the impacts are visible, and dissent is safe, then you are in the zone of defensible influence. Notice what that does. It does not guarantee a good decision. It guarantees that the path to the decision can be inspected, criticized, and improved. A few predictable failure modes show up when influence drifts from defensible to extractive. The first is concealed self-interest. The fix is not moralizing. It is disclosure. When incentives are named, the group can adjust for them, instead of being surprised by them later. A second failure mode is pressure disguised as urgency. Real deadlines exist, but manufactured urgency is a tactic, and it steals thinking time. The recovery is to separate real deadlines from invented ones. Ask, what happens if we wait 48 hours? If the answer is vague shame, not concrete cost, you have learned something. Third is evidence overload without decision relevance. Sometimes people bury a room in data to create surrender. The antidote is to tie evidence to criteria. Which metric does this change? Which risk does it reduce? Which trade-off does it justify? Information is only helpful when it changes a choice. Fourth is coalition capture. Decisions get shaped by who benefits, who pays, and who is absent. The recovery is to map those three categories explicitly. If the beneficiaries are present and the costs land on people who are not represented, you should expect blind spots and backlash. Fifth is identity threat escalation. When a disagreement becomes an attack on competence, loyalty, or belonging, people stop reasoning. They start defending. The recovery is to return to behavior, criteria, and reversible steps. Let's pause on labels. What action are we evaluating? By what standard? What is the smallest step we can take that we can undo? Put all of this together, and you get a different goal for influence. You are not trying to force agreement. You are trying to make the decision process legible, reviewable, and safe enough for truth to surface. That changes what good looks like in a meeting. Good is not speed. Good is not harmony. Good is a clear ask, visible stakes, explicit impacts, and protected dissent.